Hello everybody, welcome to the next week with Tangle 13. Let's open up my dev tools and have a look at where we are. I am still working on this story, which will be done when I get all of these tests to pass. So we had some wonderful failure last time. In particular, this post entry test failed. And let's try that again and see if it also fails. It's saying that there's a duplicate key value, and I happen to know why this is. So if you open up our table, you can see that we already have stuff in the database. And so in the background, when it tries to add these, it doesn't work because these keys are unique. You can't have more than one of each one. So it's failing because of that. We need to start our test off in a better place. So let's go to our feature class, go up to the top, and we have to add some code here, which is going to start the database off in the same place each time. Repo, delete, and you can say delete all. I'm going to choose this one here, which is faster. And so let's see if that gets past our problem. As you can see, we made it to the actual call, and I'm going to resume. And then we should see some real errors here. So let's take a look here. And this is the same error we saw last time, which is 404 not found. This is exactly where we want things to be. Now we need to make this red turn green. In an earlier episode, we wrote a controller, this BF entry controller. So this is already set up with a REST controller, and then there's a get mapping for entry list, which at this point has some test data, which is not worth anything. We're going to wire up our repo. So we're going to do auto wired, and then it's going to be BF entry repo, and then I'll call it entry repo. If we want to return this list, let's first get the list. Entry repo find all to grab every single entry in the table. That's all we really need. I could just do and I'm done. But this is not the API call that we're really looking for to enable the next thing, which is a post. One general rule of good code is to not have any magic literals. Literals are strings and numbers that are actually put into the code. What you always want to do is use constants because it's safer. Because if I had done something like, I don't know, let's say that I just forgot this, it's going to be very hard to find that. So what we do instead is create a constants class or interface really. I usually put it in an environment package, which is shared by everybody. So I'm just going to call it env. And then I'm going to create an interface. I'll just call it BF constants for now. So to use these constants, I'm going to just do implements BF constants. And then also do the same thing here. And now I can use constants that are in common. So let's make a few of these, make a prefix that shows the common, this part here. And then I'm going to do API entry for the section. So now we can change the names of everything in the API right here. Any place there are strings like this one right here, I can just replace this with API entry list. I'm putting this into the path instead of as a parameter. Let's just use the word key. So I can do All right, so put that here. To do this first add entry, which is a post, we need to do a post mapping. And it's the bean. All right, so one of the things that's coming in is going to be a magical request body. I say magical because Spring wires all this up when you put the annotations in. And so I'm going to call this just entry. Entry, repo, save. And then that's all it is. But we do want to save the one that comes back. I'm going to go one step further and be a responsible web REST citizen. So I'm going to wrap my return in a response entity and then create one. And I also want to send back the new bean itself in the body of the request. All right, so this is everything that we need except deal with this exception here. The URI is complaining because something could go wrong here, so we're going to put in a throws URI exception, and that should make everybody happy. All right, so that is a complete post mapping. Let's see if it works. I'm going to put a breakpoint right here, and let's just go. All right, so it's about to call it, and here I'll put a breakpoint here for when it comes back. And we made it to do post entry. So look at entry that's getting put in here. And you can see this is the book that's being added. And then if I hit F8, here, let's just double check and make sure. It's always good to just follow along. So there's two books here. So if I hit F8 and then go back and look at the table again, I have to refresh. It's in the database. All right, so let's do F8 again. And it's going to create this response code. So let's just resume. And did we come back? Oh, it looks like we had a problem. Oh, it's a timeout. That's because we were taking too long with our stepping. Let's run it again without the pause. And it made it through. So now it is expecting a status of is created. All right, just for now, I'm gonna get a return here. Let's do it one more time. And there it is. It's returned. Entry new. Let's take a look. So entry to add, you'll notice that it has no ID. And then entry new has an ID. So that's telling me that it's coming back with what I want. All right, let's get rid of all my breakpoints. You can click this double red circle thing here and then just go negative, 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 and hit done. So let's go back to our feature class. And you can see that there's really three steps to the scenario. So we add the entry, which was the post call, and then it gets the entry list, and then it checks the length of the entry list. So let's follow along a little bit more closely. And I'll put a breakpoint here, which is right before the post. And then I'll put breakpoint here when it gets the entry list, and then here for when it checks the entry list. So let's run it again. We're at the post. I'm going to hit F9 resume, and we're at the entry list. Hit F8 to see that it did in fact return 3 things in the list, and then hit F9 again. And now we're in the entry list length. Checks to see if it's null. It is not null. The length is supposed to be 3. Entry list length is 3. The entire scenario passes. So that means of the methods in our feature class, which are here, we have completed sample, adds, get, and length is. So now we have to do client gets entry with key, which is part of the get scenario. Client gets entry with key. Looking at this, it's possible that it works, but one can never be too sure. I'm going to go into this REST tester. Here's a little trick. If you hold down the command key, it makes things into hyperlinks, so you can just click into them. And I'll put a breakpoint right before the exchange. Let's try it out. Now this is no longer post entry, so I got to go back to the feature and run get entry now. All right, so we're in the method, and you can see that the key is Rook letters poet. And now we're going to try this do get. F9 resume. We're ready to do the exchange, and F9, and you can see that it fails. Again, we have, it was expecting an okay, but it got a not found because we haven't written it yet. So on and on this goes, where you try something, it fails, red, then you code it and try to get it to green. So let's go into the controller class, and we're going to add a new get mapping, which is going to get a single entity. We're passing in the key. Now this is different than the request body. This is a path variable, which is another annotation, and I'm just going to call it so now with this, we need to add our first customization to the repo. So if we go up to entry repo, you can see there's nothing in here. I'm going to say optional BF entry. I'll explain what optional means later, but basically it's a way of indicating that it might not return something. Find by key, and then do string p key. Now what's interesting here is that we don't actually have to implement this because of Spring. It's smart enough to look at this and match it to this in the Pojo. So there's a little bit of magic going on there. Now this bit of code might freak some of you out, although I think the good JavaScript developers will have no problem with it at all. So they might be surprised that Java can do this kind of stuff. So first we're going to do get the optional. I like to just put entry opt, and then this bit of lambda magic. You get the response from within here, and if there's something in there in the optional, then you do this, which is a response entity with an OK status and a body of response, or else you send back a response entity of not found, and then you put this build here at the end to kind of make it form it. Body forms it and build forms it. And then you return it, and I changed the response to a response entity of type BF entry. Now I have entry bean, and what we really wanted was key. This needs to match whatever variable you have in your definition, and not just have this, but I'm going to put brace p key, and it's going to replace that. Let's try it out. Get entry. I'm going to put a breakpoint here first. Okay, we're in the cucumber method, and it should do a get. Okay, here's an error. Not enough variable values. Sometimes I look for the top code that I recognize, which is this do get. All right, so it wants to be more explicit about the key. So I'm going to put in here and then put a comma, and that's going to feed it into that macro there. So then instead of this, I do that. Let's try again. Okay, so we're in the call F9. We're at the exchange point in the tester, and we made it to the API. Let's see if it finds the key. Entry opt. You can see letters to a young poet. And then let's see if it responds correctly. All right, we got a class cast exception here. Let's click this line here. For the third time, I'll say I have to do something about typecasting. So, no time like the present. You JavaScript folks are going to probably wonder what's the big deal, but we have to make our REST tester more flexible while keeping it strongly typed. So I'm going to just put in T. So I can do this. I can return T. And I can do T. Is it T class? Okay, this is a pain, but I'm going to do it anyway. So I'm passing the class, which I'm sure there's a better way to do it, but I just don't want to think about it right now. So I'm just going to put this in like this, and then that should work. And then when I do the do get, I need to put in here, and then up top, I have to qualify the tester. So it's specific to BF entries. Now, shouldn't this be unnecessary? Yeah, it would be great if this particular method in Spring could honor a parameterized class, but after experimenting with it, I found out that it's not capable. There's some hacks, but we're just going to move on. So let's add T and I go back into the feature and let's run it. So we want it to match Rilke. And the problem is it's not going to match out of the box because of this ID. They're different. So what I'll typically do here is clear the things that change between the calls. So go to my BF entry class, ID equals null. And then back here, before I check this, I can do entry clear generated. And then that hopefully is going to work. And it worked. It passed. Okay, clear my breakpoints. Next up, we're doing put, which has a lot of things we've already done. Get entry. We have to do author changed, update. That's already done. And then do this check. And down here, we just have to do deletes entry. So we only have 4 things to do. This one's pretty simple. We already have entry at this point. If you can see, you get it and then you change it. So I can simply just say set author p-value. And that should do it. I'll put a breakpoint here for later. And then update is a put. And then checking the author is simply assert equals entry get author and p-value. Pretty simple stuff there. And then delete. Now I know this must have seemed like I was speeding through this, but these are actually a lot easier than previous ones. You can see they're all one line. Let's do the test all the way from the beginning. So instead of doing individual scenarios, I can test from the beginning and do this. And so all of them will go. As you can see, post entry, put entry, and delete all have errors. And what's nice is that we can just work down the list, which I'll do in the next episode. Thanks for listening.